Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1, Entering the Green Shade. Somewhere at the edge of a forest, the light has already begun to soften. It arrives here not as a single bright thing, but as a scattering broken by leaves high overhead into quiet patches that rest upon the ground and move slowly across the moss. If you were to step in among the trees, you might feel the air cool against your skin. You might notice how the sounds of the wider world become muted and distant, folded away behind layer upon layer of green. This is a good place to slow down. There is no hurry here. Nothing needs to be done quickly. The forest floor holds its own patient rhythm, measured not in minutes, but in the gathering of moisture, the gradual turning of light, and the unhurried growth of leaves. Among those leaves, close to the ground and rising in overlapping tiers, grow the plants we have come to visit, the ferns. Ferns can be easy to overlook, yet once you begin to notice them, they seem to appear in one sheltered place after another. Their leaves spread outward in wide, divided shapes, layered like green lace. They catch the filtered light and pass it downward in softer shades. Some grow low, tucked against the base of a mossy stone. Others reach higher, their leaves arching into the open air. Beneath them, the ground is cool. Bark, moss, soil, fungi, and fallen leaves hold the moisture of an earlier rain. Let us begin with a simple question, gently asked. What exactly is a fern? A fern is a kind of vascular plant. The term may sound technical, but its meaning is simple. A vascular plant has internal tissues that carry water, dissolved minerals, and sugars from one part of the plant to another. Water and minerals can move upward from the roots. Sugars made by the green leaves can travel to growing tissues and hidden stems. This inner transport system allows a fern to support itself and hold its leaves toward the light. A typical fern has three main parts, and it is worth resting with each one for a moment. There are true roots, usually fine and branching. They reach into soil, leaf litter, bark, or another suitable surface. They take up water and minerals, and they help anchor the plant in place. There is also a stem. In many familiar ferns, the stem does not rise visibly into the air. Instead, it grows along the ground or just beneath the surface, concealed beneath leaves or moss. This kind of stem is called a rhizome. A rhizome may be short and upright, producing a close crown of leaves, allowing a fern to spread gradually through a woodland. In some species, it can climb or rise above the ground. Much of the fern's continuing life is held within this stem, even when individual leaves come and go with the seasons. And then there are the leaves. The leaves of a fern are known as fronds. Fronds are often the most visible part of the plant. They may be broad and finely divided, simple and strap-shaped, leathery, wiry, hairy, or covered with scales. Some remain green through changing seasons. Others fade during a cold or dry period, while the rhizome remains alive and waits for conditions to soften again. There is one more feature that sets ferns apart from many familiar garden plants. Ferns do not make flowers, they do not form fruits, and they do not produce seeds. Their reproductive cycle involves spores, which are much smaller and simpler than seeds. The story of those spores will lead us beneath the leaves, into the moving air, and eventually toward a second fern generation so small that it is often overlooked. For now, it is enough to know that a fern continues its life without blossom or fruit. Ferns belong to an evolutionary group called the Manilophyte lineage. This group also includes the horsetails. Club mosses, spike mosses, and quillworts are spore-bearing vascular plants too, but they belong to a separate and older lineage. Their shared use of spores does not make them ferns. The fern lineage is ancient. Its history reaches far back through geological time. Yet an ancient lineage is not the same thing as an unchanged plant. The ferns growing today are modern organisms. Their ancestors continued to evolve as climates shifted, mountains rose, forests changed, and new groups of plants appeared. Some fern branches vanished, others diversified into new species. The long story of ferns is one of continuity through change, rather than stillness without change. There are roughly 10,000 to 12,000 living fern species, depending on how they are classified and on which newly described species are included. Their greatest diversity is found in humid tropical regions, including mountain forests and cloud forests, where many different surfaces and pockets of moisture create a wide range of small habitats. Still, ferns are not confined to tropical rain or deep woodland shade. Some grow in open sunlight where sufficient water is available. Some occupy cliffs and narrow crevices in stone. Others live in alpine places protected by the shape of a rock or by the seasonal presence of snow. There are desert-adapted ferns that wait through long, dry intervals. There are ferns growing upon trunks and branches, using trees for support without normally taking food from them. There are rooted aquatic ferns, and there are small floating ferns that rest on quiet water. Ferns occur through much of the world, though not in every extreme environment. Each species belongs to its own range of light, temperature, moisture, chemistry, and shelter. There is no single fern habitat, just as there is no single fern shape. For this moment, however, we can remain in the woodland. Filtered light settles upon the upper fronds. Lower down shadows repeat across the soil. A drop of water rests at the tip of one leaflet before slipping into the leaf litter below. The scent in the air is not the scent of ferns alone. It comes from wet soil, bark, fungi, moss, and slowly changing leaves. Together they make the cool woodland atmosphere that often surrounds familiar forest ferns. Near the base of one plant, something small waits to be noticed. It is a new frond, only just beginning. It has not yet spread its blade into the air. Instead, it is curled inward upon itself, a green spiral held close to the ground. It rests among last year's leaves. At first glance, it may seem like only a small curved shoot, yet within that curl is the growing form of an entire frond. In the quiet days ahead, the spiral will begin to loosen. As the light moves gently across the forest floor, we can draw closer to this young leaf and watch in imagination as it slowly unfurls. Chapter 2. A Leaf That Slowly Unfurls. Morning comes softly to the ground beneath the trees. Light touches the edges of the leaf litter, catches on a few fine scales, and settles upon several young fern shoots rising at different stages of growth. One is still held in a tight curl, another has lifted higher, its curved tip bending over a slender stalk. A third has begun to open, revealing the first small leaflets folded within. The curled young frond is often called a fiddlehead because its rounded spiral resembles the carved scroll of a violin. It may also be called a crozier, from the shape of a curved staff. These names describe a stage of growth, not a particular fern species. Many different ferns produce fiddleheads, though they do not all curl and open in precisely the same way. The gradual unrolling of a young fern leaf has a botanical name. It is called circinate vernation. Circinate refers to the coiled arrangement, while vernation describes the way a young leaf is folded or arranged before it expands. The plain image is easier to hold. A leaf begins as a spiral, and the spiral slowly opens. Deep inside the curl lies the tender growing tip. Cells there divide and produce new growth. The coiled shape helps shelter this delicate region, while the frond is still close to the ground. On some ferns, hairs or scales provide additional protection. They may reduce drying or shield the new tissue from minor damage. In slanting morning light, these coverings can appear pale gold, silver, brown, or nearly black, depending on the species. The fiddlehead does not suddenly spring open. Its movement comes from growth over time. Across days or sometimes longer, depending on the fern and its surroundings, the stalk lengthens, the curve rises. The lower parts of the frond often expand first while the tip remains curled. Then the leaflets begin to separate. What appeared to be a single compact spiral becomes a central axis with new green divisions opening to either side. There is no need to measure the curve or assign it a perfect mathematical rule. Fern spirals vary. Their beauty rests not in following one universal pattern, but in the quiet way growth protects what has not yet opened. Each frond begins at a growing point on the fern's stem or rhizome. The shape of that rhizome influences the form of the whole plant. A short, upright rhizome may produce fronds in a close crown. From above, the leaves may seem to radiate from one central place, arching outward like a low green fountain. A long, creeping rhizome creates another pattern. It extends beneath the soil or leaf litter, sending up fronds at intervals. What looks like a group of separate plants may be connected by one continuing stem hidden below. Some rhizomes climb over rocks, tree surfaces. Some become elevated. In tree ferns, the upright stem may rise several meters and support a crown of large fronds. Though it looks trunk-like, it is not a woody trunk formed in the same way as the trunk of an oak or a pine. The roots of most ferns arise from the rhizome, rather than growing from one deep central taproot. They branch from points along the stem. They enter the surrounding soil, moss, or trapped organic matter, where they take up water and dissolved minerals. Above them, the fronds gather light and make sugars. Between roots and leaves, vascular tissues carry materials through the plant. Even in a small woodland fern, there is an organized movement linking the visible green leaf to the concealed stem below. A creeping rhizome may gradually form a colony. New fronds appear a little farther along each season, filling a bank or spreading beneath shrubs. A compact rhizome may remain in one place, replacing old leaves with new ones in a close circle. Neither pattern is hurried. Growth follows available light, moisture, temperature, and the stored resources of the plant. Now and then, several fiddleheads may rise together from one crown. One remains low and tightly folded. One stands above it, still curved at the tip. Seen together, they reveal the process without requiring us to watch every moment. Each frond holds a different part of the same gradual movement. At the lower end, the stipe, or leaf stalk, has already lengthened. Higher up, small leaflets remain folded. At the top, the growing tip is still enclosed within the final turn of the curl. Rain may collect briefly on the scales. A moving drop may follow the curve downward before falling to the ground. The frond itself opens because of growth, not because the rain pulls it apart. Though suitable moisture helps support the living tissues as they expand. Not every fern follows this familiar form exactly. Some young fronds are only slightly curved, and aquatic ferns may look quite different from the woodland examples held in our imagination. Fern diversity allows many variations on the theme. Still, circinate vernation is one of the most recognizable features of many ferns. It offers a visible record of a leaf becoming itself. The frond that began close to the soil now lifts into filtered light. Its leaflets widen. Fine veins begin to show through the thin green surface. The last curve at the tip relaxes, and the blade takes on its mature shape. This opening may seem complete, but it belongs to a much longer unfolding. Behind this one leaf stands the history of a lineage extending through hundreds of millions of years. The slow release of the fiddlehead can therefore lead us toward another kind of opening. One preserved not in a single morning, but in layers of stone. From the green spiral before us, we can let our attention travel gently backward toward a time long before flowers appeared. Chapter 3. Before the Age of Flowers. Imagine a flat piece of stone resting in the quiet drawer of a museum. Across its surface lies the faint impression of a leaf. Its green color is gone. The living tissue has vanished. What remains is a pattern, pressed into rock and carried forward through an expanse of time too large to picture all at once. The fossil record is made from traces such as these. Fossils do not preserve every organism or every landscape. They offer scattered pages, sometimes clear and sometimes incomplete, from which scientists reconstruct the history of life. Plants began colonizing land hundreds of millions of years ago. Exact dates vary according to the evidence being considered. Fossil spores may suggest one boundary. Preserved plant bodies may suggest another. Molecular studies can offer additional estimates. It is best to think of the dates as broad markers along a vast shore. By the Silurian period, more than 400 million years ago, vascular plants were present on land. They had internal tissues for moving water and nutrients, though many early forms were small and unlike the forests we know today. During the Devonian, roughly 400 to 360 million years ago, land vegetation became taller and more varied. Early members and relatives of the broader fern lineage appear in the fossil record from this immense interval. These plants were not necessarily identical to modern familiar ferns. Evolutionary lineages branch. Features are gained, altered, and sometimes lost. The early fossil record contains forms that do not fit neatly into any living group. Even so, the deep ancestry of ferns reaches into a world that existed long before the first flowering plants. The oldest widely accepted fossils of flowering plants are about 130 to 140 million years old. Proposed earlier evidence remains debated. By comparison, vascular spore-bearing lineages had already been present for a very long time. Between those broad markers lies the Carboniferous period, roughly 359 to 299 million years ago. In parts of the Carboniferous world, extensive wetlands supported dense vegetation. Shallow water moved through low ground. Plant remains gathered in oxygen-poor places where their breakdown was slowed. These ancient wetland forests included true ferns and fern-like plants. They also included giant lycophytes, which belonged to a lineage separate from ferns, as well as horsetail relatives, seed ferns, and other early seed plants. No single group filled every wetland. It would not be accurate to say that ferns alone covered the Carboniferous world. The vegetation was varied, and in many coal-forming forests, giant lycophytes were especially important. Layer after layer of plant material accumulated, with burial, heat, pressure, and geological time. Some of this ancient vegetation contributed to the formation of coal. Coal is not simply compressed fern leaves. It arose from many kinds of plants living in ancient wetlands. Petroleum generally has a different history and often traces much of its origin to aquatic microorganisms rather than to forest ferns. These distinctions do not make the story less remarkable. They make it more spacious. A piece of coal may hold the altered remains of a whole plant community, gathered through long intervals of growth, water, burial, and transformation. Fern history continued far beyond the Carboniferous. As the continents changed and new climates developed, some ancient lineages disappeared. Other fern groups persisted. Many modern fern lineages diversified during the Mesozoic and Cenozoic eras, including after flowering plants had begun to dominate many forests. In some cases, the spread of flowering trees may have created new shaded habitats beneath complex canopies. Ferns continued adapting to life on the forest floor, on trunks and branches, beside streams, within rock crevices, and in open places. Modern ferns are therefore not unchanged survivors, preserved from the age of dinosaurs. They are the present branches of evolving lineages. Their history includes extinction and renewal, divergence and adaptation. The phrase ancient fern can be useful if it refers to the lineage. It becomes misleading if it suggests that an individual species has remained fixed for hundreds of millions of years. A living fern is not a museum object. Its cells respond to present light. Its roots enter present soil. Its spores move through today's air. It carries a deep inheritance, yet it belongs completely to the world now surrounding it. We can return then from ancient wetlands to the woodland where our journey began. The stone impression fades from view. In its place, a green frond rises beside a shaded stream. Light passes through the blade, revealing a network of veins. Some of the fossil patterns may seem familiar. A central line runs through the leaf. Smaller divisions repeat to either side. Fine veins branch within each segment. But resemblance alone does not tell us the exact relationship between a fossil plant and a living one. Botanists study many details before placing a specimen within an evolutionary lineage. For us, the pattern can serve as a quiet bridge. The faint architecture preserved in stone leads back to the architecture of a living frond. We can now look at that leaf more closely, following its stalk, its central axis, and its repeating divisions from base to tip. Chapter 4. The Architecture of a Frond. A single frond leans across a patch of filtered light. Rain has passed through the forest, and a droplet travels slowly along the central axis. It pauses where a leaflet joins the stem, then moves on toward the lower edge. At first, the frond may seem like one broad shape. With a little attention, its structure becomes clear. The stalk beneath the leafy portion is called the stipe. It lifts the blade away from the rhizome and holds it where light and air can reach it. The stipe may be green, brown, reddish, dark, smooth, hairy, or covered with scales. In some ferns it is short and almost hidden. In others it forms a long, graceful support below the blade. Where the leafy portion begins, the central stalk continues through it. This continuation is called the rachis. For calm consistency, we can pronounce it rachis. The expanded leafy portion is the blade, also called the lamina. The blade may be simple or intricately divided. In a familiar feather-shaped fern, the primary leaflets arranged along the rachis are called pinnae. One leaflet is a pinna, more than one are pinnae. If those pinnae are divided again, The smaller portions are called pinnules. There is no need to hold all the terms at once. The basic structure is enough. A stalk supports a blade. A central axis runs through it. Leaflets repeat along the sides, and sometimes those leaflets divide into smaller leaflets. A frond divided into pinnae is described as pinnate. This arrangement gives many ferns their familiar feather-like outline. Yet not every fern is feather-shaped. Some have undivided blades like green ribbons. Others are deeply lobed, but not fully separated into leaflets. Some are divided once. Some are divided twice, 3 times, or even more, creating an airy pattern of increasingly fine segments. Place a simple strap-shaped frond beside a many-divided woodland fern, and they may appear to belong to very different kinds of plants. Beneath the variation, however, lies a related botanical plan. Each blade is a leaf. Each is connected to a stem. Each contains vascular tissue and green cells that use light to make sugars. The repeated divisions can help a broad leaf occupy space without becoming one unbroken surface. Yet fern form reflects many influences, and no single explanation accounts for every shape. Texture varies too. A thin forest frond may appear translucent when held toward the light. A rock fern may carry small leathery divisions that better tolerate exposed conditions. Hairs or scales may cover parts of the blade or stalk. Fine veins run through the green tissue. These pathways carry water and support the movement of materials within the leaf. Vein patterns differ among fern groups. Some veins branch freely and end near the margin. Others reconnect into networks. Botanists can use these patterns, along with scales, hairs, spore-bearing structures, rhizomes, and other features, to help identify a species. The veins are often easiest to see when light passes through the blade. They appear as pale or dark lines, branching quietly within each pinna. A raindrop may follow them only briefly, before surface tension draws it another way. The internal movement of water follows the plant's own tissues, mostly after water has entered through the roots and moved upward. Fronds may serve more than one function. Many carry out photosynthesis and also bear the structures that produce spores. In such species, a fertile frond may look much like a sterile one, except for the patterns beneath it. Other ferns divide these roles between differently shaped leaves. A broad green sterile frond may gather light, while a narrower fertile frond rises separately, carrying spore-producing structures in more concentrated arrangements. Some fertile structures resemble narrow spikes. Others look like contracted versions of an ordinary blade. The shared life cycle appears through many outward forms. Far above the low woodland plants, tree ferns offer another variation in architecture. Their stems may become tall and trunk-like, supporting crowns of large fronds. These stems are not woody trunks built in the same way as those of most trees. Their support comes from a different internal arrangement, often strengthened by persistent leaf bases and masses of roots. Beneath a tree fern crown, the arching fronds can form a high green shelter. Mist passes between them. Water runs down the rachis and gathers near the stem before reaching lower plants. Whether it belongs to a towering tree fern or a small plant tucked into stone, every frond occupies a particular place. The stipe establishes its angle. The rachis carries the blade outward. Pinnae or lobes arrange green tissue within the available light. Once these parts become familiar, the forest seems to offer a quiet botanical language. Here is a simple blade. There, a pinnate one. Near the stream, a frond divided into fine lace. Higher on a trunk, a leathery epiphytic fern holds its leaves close to bark. The structures are related, but the settings differ. And now the view can widen. We can follow these varied fronds away from this one woodland and into the many other places where ferns have made their homes. Chapter 5. Gardens Beneath the Trees. Mist moves between the trunks of a mountain forest. It gathers on bark, darkens moss, and settles in small droplets upon a fern growing high above the ground. Below, tree fern crowns open like broad umbrellas. Farther away, water rests almost motionless beneath floating leaves. The world of ferns extends through many habitats. Woodland ferns are perhaps the most familiar. Beneath a forest canopy, sunlight is filtered by branches and leaves. Wind is softened. Temperatures may change more gradually than they do in open ground. Fallen leaves add organic matter to the soil. Moss and litter help retain moisture. Shaded banks, tree bases, and the edges of streams provide small differences in drainage and shelter. These conditions suit many species, but not all woodland ferns need the same amount of shade or water. One may favor deep cover near a stream, another may grow at a brighter forest edge. A third may appear where a tree has fallen and opened a temporary space in the canopy. In humid tropical and subtropical forests, fern diversity becomes especially rich. Warmth, rain, elevation, mist, and varied tree surfaces create many possible microsites. A microsite is simply a small place with its own particular conditions. The shaded side of a branch may differ from the exposed side. A pocket where leaves collect may hold more water and nutrients than the smooth bark beside it. Epiphytic ferns grow upon other plants, usually trunks or branches. An epicite uses its host mainly for support. It does not normally send feeding structures into the tree to take sap, and so it is not automatically a parasite. High above the forest floor, an epiphytic fern gathers resources from rain, mist, dust, and organic debris. Leaves may collect around its roots. Tiny fragments of bark and soil may lodge within the plant. As trapped material breaks down, nutrients become available. Basket ferns and other epiphytes can create small elevated pockets of organic matter. Their leaves intercept falling debris, while their roots occupy the sheltered material close to a branch. Nearby, tree ferns lift their crowns into the humid air. They are especially associated with tropical and subtropical forests, although some grow in cool temperate rainforests. Mist passes through the broad fronds, droplets gather, merge, and descend from one layer of leaves to another. Now the scene changes from air to water. On the surface of a quiet pond float small aquatic ferns. Azolla may form a fine green or reddish covering. Salvinia also floats freely, its form quite unlike the tall fronds of a woodland fern. Marsilia is rooted or seasonally aquatic. Its leaflets may suggest a four-part clover, reminding us again that aquatic fern forms do not always match the familiar feather-shaped leaf. Some aquatic ferns produce two kinds of spores, rather than one. We will return to that variation later. For now, the still water offers another answer to the question of where a fern can live. From the pond, we can travel toward a much drier landscape. A stone surface warms beneath open light. In a narrow crevice, a small fern remains sheltered from the strongest wind. Its fronds may be compact or leathery. Hairs and scales may reflect light or reduce water loss. Its roots and rhizome occupy a protected space where a little moisture lasts longer. Dryland ferns still require water. Their adaptation does not remove that need. Instead, they make use of brief rains, seasonal moisture, and favorable microsites. Some become dormant during drought. Growth slows greatly. Fronds may curl inward, reducing their exposed surface. Certain species are known as resurrection ferns because they can tolerate severe drying and become green and active again after water returns. The name is figurative. The fern has not returned from death. Its living tissues endured the dry interval and resumed activity when rehydrated. After rain, a curled frond may gradually relax. Green color becomes more visible. The change is not endless resilience, and the tissues must remain alive throughout the dry period. Even drought-tolerant ferns have limits. Higher in the mountains, alpine ferns occupy another kind of shelter. They may grow in rock crevices where stone moderates temperature and protects them from wind. Snow can insulate the ground during part of the year and later provide moisture as it melts. The growing season may be brief. A small, protected hollow can make the difference between exposure and survival. Across these habitats, the word adaptation does not mean perfection. It means that particular features and life patterns suit particular conditions well enough for a population to continue. Shade helps one fern. Open sun suits another. One grows in soil rich with leaf litter. Another rests on bark. One floats. One waits within dry stone. Each remains a vascular, spore-bearing plant, connected to the wider fern lineage, yet each expresses that inheritance differently. We can now return to a single, ordinary-looking woodland frond. Its upper surface is green and familiar, but when the leaf is lifted gently and viewed from below, another landscape appears. There are small brown patterns beneath the blade. Dots, lines, and rows follow the divisions of the leaf. They are not signs of harm. They are part of the fern's hidden work. Chapter 6. The Secret Patterns Underneath. The frond turns slightly in the filtered light. Its upper surface catches a soft green brightness. Beneath it, protected from the most direct sun and rain, lie rows of cinnamon brown dots. At first, these marks might be mistaken for damage or disease, yet their spacing is too regular. One follows another along the veins. Similar patterns repeat beneath neighboring pinnae. These are sori, clusters of structures that produce spores. A single cluster is called a sorus. More than one are called sori. Sori vary widely in shape and position. On one fern they may appear as round dots. On another they form elongated lines. Some follow the branching veins, while others lie near the margins of the blade. In certain species the sori create broad bands. In others they remain separate and neat, like small marks placed carefully beneath each leaflet. Their brown or golden color often develops as they mature. It can be a normal sign of fertility rather than decay. Within each sorus are many tiny capsules called sporangia. One capsule is a sporangium, many are sporangia. Spores form inside these capsules. They are produced through a kind of cell division called meiosis, which will become more meaningful when we follow the fern's full life cycle. For now, imagine each sporangium as a minute container. It is much too small to study clearly without magnification, yet together, many sporangia create a visible sorus. Some sori are partly covered by a thin flap of tissue called an indusium. The indusium protects the developing sporangia. Its shape and position can also help botanists identify different ferns. An indusium may resemble a tiny shield, a narrow covering, or an edge of the frond folded over the sorus. Not every fern has one. When viewed through a hand lens or microscope, a mature sporangium reveals a delicate mechanism. In many familiar ferns, part of its wall bears a band of specialized thickened cells. This band is called the annulus. As the mature sporangium dries, water leaves its cells. The annulus changes shape, drawing the capsule open. It can then snap back rapidly at a microscopic scale, helping release the spores. The action is quick but tiny. There is no need to imagine a loud or forceful event. In the forest, it happens without a sound that we can hear. A spore leaves its capsule and enters the surrounding air. Not all fern groups use precisely the same sporangial structure. The familiar annulus mechanism belongs to many, but fern reproduction includes variations. Nor do all sporangia sit beneath an ordinary broad frond. Some ferns produce specially modified fertile leaves. These may be narrower than the green sterile fronds nearby. Their leaf tissue can be reduced so that the spore-bearing areas become more prominent. Other species carry sporangia on fertile spikes or unusual structures, but they are not universal. Still, the underside of a familiar fertile frond is a good place to begin noticing the fern's reproductive world. From above, the plant appears to be made only of green leaves. From below, those leaves reveal repeating arrangements of sori, and within each sorus, clusters of sporangia. Within each sporangium are spores. The view narrows from the whole plant to the frond, from the frond to the sorus, and from the sorus to the capsule. At every scale, there is structure. The sori often align with veins because the living tissues of the blade support their development. One row may run down each pinna. Another species may place its sori near the outer edge, following the curved margin. Their exact arrangement is not merely decorative, though it can be beautiful. It reflects the fern's inherited form and provides botanists with useful clues. A leaf can therefore be read from both sides. Above, green tissue gathers light. Below, fertile structures prepare the next stage of the life cycle. In many species, one frond carries out both tasks at once. A thin layer of air moves beneath the leaf. It passes over the mature sori and between the lower pinnae. One sporangium has dried enough to open. Its spores are released into that moving air. Individually, they are usually too small to see clearly. Under suitable light, a large release may become faintly visible, but most of the journey occurs beyond ordinary sight. The frond remains where it is, anchored to the rhizome. The spores do not. They settle nearby, rise briefly, or move sideways on currents that pass unnoticed between the leaves. To understand what follows, we can leave the frond behind for a little while and travel with one of those small reproductive cells. Chapter 7. A Journey Made by Spores. A shaft of pale light enters between two branches. The air within it seems still, yet it is always moving a little. Warm air rises. cooler air settles. A passing breeze bends the upper fronds and creates a softer current beneath them. Into this quiet movement, a fern spore is released. A spore is a reproductive cell. In most familiar ferns, spores are produced by meiosis inside the sporangia. Meiosis is a form of cell division that reduces the number of chromosome sets. This prepares the way for the alternation between two stages of the fern life cycle. The details can wait. The important idea, for now, is that the sporangium produces spores, and each suitable spore has the potential to begin the fern's smaller, hidden generation. Most familiar ferns are homosporous. This means they produce one general kind of spore. There are exceptions. Some aquatic ferns are heterosporous, producing two distinct types. They make smaller male-associated microspores and larger, female-associated megaspores. For the woodland fern before us, we can follow the simpler, homosporous pattern. The released spore is tiny and light. Wind is an important means of dispersal. A current may carry the spore between plants, across a bank, or above the surrounding leaves. Most spores do not travel to distant horizons. Many settle close to the parent plant. A small fraction may travel much farther when air currents and conditions allow. Water can also move spores. Rain may wash one from a frond and carry it into a crevice. Flowing water may transport spores along a stream bank. Animals, shifting soil, or pieces of plant material can move them as well. Dispersal is simply movement away from the parent. Arrival, however, does not guarantee growth. A spore may land where the surface is too dry, too dark, too exposed, or otherwise unsuitable. It may remain inactive for a time, or it may never establish at all. Success depends upon a favorable microsite. There must be enough moisture for germination, along with suitable light, temperature, chemistry, and other local conditions. A patch of damp soil no wider than a fingertip may be enough. So may a pocket of moss on bark, a sheltered stone surface, or a small bank protected beneath leaves. A spore settles. It is important to understand what it is not. A fern spore is not a seed, it is not pollen, and it is not a miniature leafy fern waiting to expand. A seed contains a young multicellular plant embryo. It usually includes stored nourishment and a protective coat. These resources help the embryo survive and begin growth. A fern spore is typically a single reproductive cell when released. It carries fewer stored resources and less protection. Instead of growing directly into the familiar large fern, it begins another life stage. The distinction between spores and seeds reflects two different kinds of plant life cycle. Neither needs to be thought of as better or worse. Each belongs to a long evolutionary history and works within particular conditions. A seed can shelter an embryo through difficult circumstances. A spore can be produced in great numbers and dispersed through very small openings and across broad areas. Yet most spores do not become established plants. Their small size makes movement possible, but it also leaves them dependent on a suitable place. Our imagined spore has reached such a place. It rests on damp soil beneath a bank. Moisture remains between tiny soil particles. Light arrives in a faint green wash, reflected from the leaves above. Under favorable conditions, the spore germinates. Germination is the beginning of growth. The spore's wall opens, and a cell extends. Further divisions follow. What develops is not yet a root, rhizome, or frond. It is a separate, small plant body. At first, it may resemble a fine green thread or film. As it grows, it can become a thin shape only a few millimeters across. This is the hidden generation of the fern. It may complete its life close to the surface of the soil, easily concealed by a grain of earth, a fragment of bark, or the shadow of a moss leaf. Above it, the large sporophyte fronds continue to move with the air. Their sori may release more spores. Beneath them, an entirely different form carries out the next part of the cycle. Two stages linked to one another take turns. To see how they connect, we can lower our attention all the way to the ground and look closely at the small green body that is formed from the spore. Chapter 8. The Fern's Hidden Generation. Close to the damp soil lies a shape that would be easy to miss. It is thin and green, perhaps only a few millimeters across. In a common textbook form, it resembles a small heart, with a notch at the upper edge and a broad, translucent surface below. This is a fern gametophyte, often called a prothallus. It is not simply a baby fern. It is an independent stage of the fern life cycle with its own form and its own reproductive role. To understand this cycle, it may help to imagine two linked chapters. The first chapter is the familiar leafy fern. It has roots, a rhizome, and fronds. It produces spores and sporangia. This leafy stage is called the sporophyte, meaning the spore-producing generation. The second chapter begins when a spore germinates. Instead of becoming a leafy sporophyte immediately, it grows into the gametophyte, the generation that produces eggs and sperm. The gametophyte is often much smaller than the sporophyte. It has no true roots, stems, or fronds. Fine hair-like structures called rhizoids anchor it to the surface and can assist with limited absorption. Rhizoids are simpler than true roots. Many familiar above-ground gametophytes are green and photosynthetic. Their thin tissues gather light and make sugars. But the heart-shaped green prothallus is not the only possible form. Some fern gametophytes are ribbon-like or branching. Some live for long periods. Some occur underground and do not photosynthesize. These may depend heavily upon fungal partners for carbon and nutrients. Real gametophytes vary according to lineage, habitat, age, and conditions. The heart shape is a useful example, not a rule for every fern. On the small gametophyte, reproductive structures form. Some produce eggs, others produce swimming sperm. A single gametophyte may produce both, or the roles may be separated among individuals. Timing and environment can influence which structures develop. The sperm are motile, meaning they can move actively, yet they cannot travel through dry air or across a dry surface. They need a thin film of water. Rain may provide that film, so may dew, mist, or consistently damp soil. Within this narrow watery path, sperm can swim toward an egg. When an egg and sperm unite, fertilization occurs. The first cell formed by that union is called a zygote. The zygote has two sets of chromosomes, one set contributed through the egg and another through the sperm. A cell with two sets is described as diploid. The gametophyte has one set of chromosomes and is described as haploid. These terms can remain light in the mind. One set belongs to the gametophyte stage, two sets belong to the sporophyte stage. The alternation between them is called alternation of generations. The diploid sporophyte produces haploid spores through meiosis. A spore grows into a haploid gametophyte. The gametophyte produces eggs and sperm. Fertilization joins them and restores the diploid state, beginning a new sporophyte. Then the cycle continues. It may help to follow the sequence once more slowly. The large leafy fern is the sporophyte. Sporangia on its fertile fronds produce spores. A spore settles in a suitable place and germinates. It grows into a small gametophyte, or prothallus. The gametophyte produces eggs and sperm. In a film of water, sperm can reach an egg. Fertilization creates a zygote. The zygote grows into a young sporophyte. At first, the new sporophyte remains attached to the gametophyte. Its earliest growth draws support from that small plant body. A first tiny leaf appears. It may look simpler than the mature fronds that will come later. A young root begins to enter the soil. As the sporophyte develops, it becomes independent. Its roots take up water and minerals. Its own green leaves make sugars. The gametophyte may gradually fade. Soon the familiar fern form takes over the visible space. A rhizome develops. More fronds rise. In time, fertile leaves may produce sori and sporangia, beginning another round of spores. The two generations are not competing plants. They are connected stages in one continuing cycle. Nor is alternation of generations a story of one individual dying and being reborn. It is a biological sequence in which two multicellular forms alternate, each producing the next. Fern reproductive patterns can be more varied than this central account. Some gametophytes can fertilize themselves. Others more often reproduce with different gametophytes, which can increase genetic mixing. The production of eggs and sperm may change with age or local conditions. Chemical signals in neighboring gametophytes can influence development in some species. A minority of ferns can produce sporophytes without ordinary fertilization, through processes such as apogamy. These exceptions remind us that living systems rarely fit every simple outline without variation. Still, the central pattern remains clear. A leafy sporophyte makes spores, a spore makes a gametophyte makes eggs and sperm. Fertilization begins a new sporophyte. What seems at first like a single green fern is part of a cycle moving between two forms. One form rises visibly through the woodland. The other remains close to damp soil, thin as a small green film. A new sporophyte leaf now emerges beside the gametophyte. The leaf is no larger than a delicate green tongue. Nearby, a droplet rests between particles of soil. That moisture has supported germination. It has kept the gametophyte's thin tissues from drying, and it has provided the path needed for fertilization. The hidden generation therefore leads us naturally toward rain, mist, and the many quiet roles of water in a fern's life. Chapter 9. Rain, Water, and Renewal. Rain begins high in the canopy. At first, only a few drops reach the lower leaves. They tap softly upon one frond, then another. Soon the bark darkens, the moss brightens, and water enters the leaf litter below. A line of droplets gathers along the edges of a pinna. One grows heavier and falls. Another remains, holding a small reflection of the green forest. Water matters to ferns in several different ways. It supports ordinary plant growth. Roots take up water from soil or another growing surface. Vascular tissues carry it upward through the rhizome and into the fronds. Within the leaves, water helps cells maintain their form and supports photosynthesis and other living processes. Dissolved minerals also move from the roots into the plant. Most water and minerals enter through roots. It is therefore misleading to imagine that fern leaves drink rainfall in the same manner. Some species can absorb limited water through leaves, scales, or other surfaces, especially in particular habitats. This ability should not be generalized to every fern. Rain falling on a frond may run downward to the soil. It may reduce drying around an epiphyte. It may collect in moss or organic debris where roots can reach it later. Moisture also supports spore germination. A dry spore resting on a suitable surface may begin growth only after water and other conditions become favorable. The young gametophyte is thin and easily affected by drying. A humid microsite beneath moss, bark, or leaf litter can help it remain active. Most distinctively, free water is important for sexual reproduction. Fern sperm are motile. To reach an egg, they swim through a thin film of water across or around the gametophyte. This does not mean that every fern requires a pond. A film supplied by rain, dew, mist, or a consistently damp surface may be enough. The distance is tiny. At the scale of the gametophyte, a nearly invisible layer of moisture becomes a pathway. This dependence helps explain why so many ferns are associated with humid environments. It also helps explain why small changes in shade, airflow, and surface moisture can affect reproduction. Yet ferns differ greatly in their water needs. Some live where humidity remains high and the ground rarely dries deeply. Others endure seasonal dryness by becoming dormant. Growth slows and the plant waits within its rhizome. Desiccation-tolerant species can survive a more severe loss of water. Their fronds may curl and appear dry, then gradually resume activity when moisture returns, as long as the tissues have remained alive. Even so, no fern is independent of water. The timing, amount, and source may differ, but water remains essential to living cells. A visibly wet place is not automatically suitable. Too much standing water may exclude a species that needs well-drained soil. Light may be too low or too bright. Soil chemistry, competition, and disturbance also shape where a fern can grow. Moisture is one part of a complete habitat. The droplets now resting on the frond could have several origins. They may be rain, they may be dew formed as surfaces cooled. They may be condensation from mist. Occasionally, liquid is pushed out through specialized structures near leaf edges in a process called guttation. Without context, however, a droplet cannot always be identified by appearance alone. Whatever their source, the droplets follow the contours of the blade. One moves along a vein. Another clings beneath a leaflet. A third falls into the moss, where it joins water already held among tiny leaves. From there, some moisture enters the soil. Fine fern roots move through that soil, together with fungal threads and the roots of neighboring plants. The rain does not belong to one organism. It passes over bark, between leaves, into moss, around stones, and through the upper layers of earth. It briefly connects the canopy to the forest floor. As the shower becomes gentler, a small insect rests beneath a pinna. Mosses hold water on a fallen log. Fungi occupy the hidden spaces around roots. The fern stands within this community, neither isolated nor entirely self-sufficient. Following the rain downward, we arrive among its many neighbors. Chapter 10. Neighbors in the Forest. A fallen log lies across the shaded ground. Its bark has loosened with time. Moss covers one side, while small fern fronds rise from a pocket where leaf litter has gathered. Fine roots enter the soft material beneath them. Above the log, the forest canopy shapes the light. Leaves and branches reduce the intensity of midday sun. They soften wind and help moderate humidity and temperature. When a gap opens, these conditions change. More light reaches the ground, but so may greater heat and drying. A fern's habitat is influenced by trees even when the fern does not grow directly upon them. Tree bases, shaded banks, fallen branches, and logs can provide establishment sites. Their surfaces differ in moisture, stability, and chemistry. One may suit spores and gametophytes, while another does not. Epiphytic ferns use trunks and branches as elevated growing places. They are generally not parasitic. Their presence can still affect the small community around them. Leaves and debris caught among their roots may hold moisture and organic matter. Invertebrates may shelter there. Other small plants may establish nearby. Below ground or within moss and bark, another relationship may be unfolding. Many fern sporophytes form close associations with fungi around or within their roots. Such an association is called a mycorrhiza. In a mycorrhizal relationship, fungal threads can extend into soil or another substrate. They may help a plant gain access to mineral nutrients and water. In return, the fungus may receive carbon compounds made by the plant through photosynthesis. This description offers a broad pattern, not a promise that every association is equally beneficial. Mycorrhizal relationships vary among species and environments. Their effects can shift with changing conditions. Some fern gametophytes depend especially strongly upon fungal partners. An underground gametophyte without green tissue cannot make enough of its own sugars through photosynthesis. It may rely on associated fungi for carbon and nutrients. The fungus, in turn, may be connected with other plants. These networks can be complex, and the precise exchanges differ from one system to another. On the surface, mosses create another kind of fern neighborhood. Mosses are not miniature ferns. They are non-vascular plants with a different structure and life cycle. Their small leaves and stems can form mats that retain water. These mats may provide damp surfaces where spores settle and gametophytes grow. Ferns and mosses can share a log or bank, but sharing does not mean that every interaction is cooperative. They may also compete for light, moisture, nutrients, and space. A forest community contains both exchange and competition. Its quiet appearance does not require perfect harmony. Animals also use fern habitat in varied ways. A small insect may rest beneath a pinna. Mollusks or insects may feed upon fern tissue. Other invertebrates occupy litter gathered around rhizomes. Fronds can provide cover or resting surfaces for small animals. Dense fern growth may create a sheltered layer close to the ground. These relationships differ widely among places and species. There is no single animal community supported by every fern. Ferns also interact with soil. Roots and rhizomes can help hold surface material on some banks and slopes. Their effectiveness depends upon the species, density, soil, incline, and level of disturbance. It would be too broad to say that all ferns prevent erosion. When old fronds fall, their litter contributes organic material. As fungi and other organisms break it down, nutrients return to the surrounding system. Some fern species establish quickly after disturbance. Spores can reach open ground, and certain ferns grow well in newly available light. Their effects are not always the same. A colonizing fern may cover exposed soil and contribute organic matter, yet dense growth can also limit other plants. Bracken, for example, can form extensive stands. Its fronds may shade tree seedlings, while its rhizomes occupy soil space. In some settings, it can suppress the establishment of other vegetation. Ferns are therefore not uniformly helpful or harmful. Their ecological role depends upon context. From the woodland, we can move towards still water again. Across the surface floats a zola, a small aquatic fern. Its leaves overlap into a fine green or reddish layer. Within cavities in its leaves live nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria are photosynthetic bacteria, once commonly called blue-green algae, though they are not true algae. The partnership allows atmospheric nitrogen to be converted into forms that living organisms can use. This process is called nitrogen fixation. Because of this association, azolla has been used in some rice-growing systems as a green manure and nitrogen source. Plant material can contribute nitrogen and organic matter to the agricultural system. The scientific name applied to the cyanobacterial partner has changed as taxonomy has been revised. Older sources often call it Anabaena azolae, while newer work may use Trichormus azolae or related terminology. The changing name does not alter the calm image before us. A floating fern rests upon water. Within its tiny leaves, another organism carries out a chemical process that affects the nutrients available around it. The fern is a habitat, a partner, and a participant in a larger system. Back in the forest, fungi surround roots. Moss holds moisture. Trees shape shade and wind. Animals rest, feed, and move among leaves. Ferns occupy space, contribute litter, and sometimes compete strongly. A symbiosis is simply a close relationship between different organisms. It does not always mean that both benefit equally. Nature contains mutual benefit, unequal exchange, competition, and changing balances. The fern belongs within all of this. It is not merely a decoration beneath the trees, nor is it the sir of the forest. It is one member of a patient and complicated community. Human communities have noticed ferns too. People have cultivated them, carried them across oceans, pressed them onto paper, repeated their patterns in art, and surrounded them with stories. From the living patterns of the forest, we can now move into the many ways ferns have entered human imagination. Chapter 11: Ferns and Human Imagination. Condensation gathers on the panes of a glasshouse. Inside, humid air surrounds rows of living fronds. Some rise from pots. Others grow along damp stone or rest beneath glass. Their shapes repeat in shadows upon the floor. Ferns have long been cultivated in shaded gardens, courtyards, glasshouses, terrariums, and indoor collections. Their varied forms suit many kinds of design spaces. A simple strap-shaped leaf can contrast with a finely divided frond. Tree ferns create height, while small woodland species occupy the shelter below. In 19th century Britain, enthusiasm for ferns became so intense that it acquired a name. Pteridamania, or fern fever, described the widespread interest in finding, collecting, cultivating, studying, and displaying them. Ferns appeared in private collections and public displays. Special ferneries were built to provide shade and humidity. Their patterns moved beyond gardens. Frond shapes appeared in ceramics, textiles, illustrations, carved wood, architecture, and decorative metalwork. A pressed fern could be arranged carefully on paper, preserving the outline of its stipe, rachis, and pinnae. Printed images allowed the same form to travel farther still. Wardium cases also helped move living plants. A Wardium case is a glazed container that maintains a humid internal environment. Sealed or partly sealed cases protected plants during long sea voyages, reducing exposure to salt spray and limiting water loss. They supported the transport and trade of ferns and many other plants. This history should not be viewed only as a charming story of glass and greenery. Plant transfer took place within broader systems of colonial collecting and commerce. Enthusiastic gathering sometimes damaged wild populations, especially when rare or slow-growing species were removed. Admiration does not always lead automatically to care. Ferns entered folklore as well as horticulture. Because they make no obvious flowers or seeds, some European traditions imagined a mysterious fern seed. Stories associated it with invisibility, hidden knowledge, or midsummer magic. Botanically, there is no such seed. Ferns reproduce through spores and gametophytes. The legendary fern seed belongs to folklore, not plant anatomy. Nor should one region's stories be treated as universal. Human relationships with ferns differ among cultures, landscapes, and languages. In New Zealand, the silver fern is an important symbol. Its form appears in national, community, and organizational contexts. The koru is a Maori spiral form based upon the shape of an unfurling frond. Depending on artistic and cultural context, it may carry meanings that include growth, renewal, movement, and connection. These meanings belong to living cultural traditions. They cannot be reduced to one fixed decorative definition. The form itself brings us back to the fiddlehead. A young frond curls inward, protecting its growing tip, then opens gradually into a wider leaf. It is understandable that people have found meaning in that visible movement. Ferns have also been used materially in many regions. Different species have served as food, fiber, bedding, dye, building material, and medicine within particular traditions. These uses depend upon local knowledge and exact identification. Some young fronds of correctly identified species are eaten in certain cultures after prescribed harvesting and preparation, but fiddlehead is only the name of a growth stage. It is not a safe food category. Many ferns are unsuitable for eating. Some contain toxic or potentially carcinogenic compounds. Bracken is a major example of concern. No unidentified fern should be gathered or eaten. Traditional use alone does not establish modern medical safety or effectiveness, and the properties of one species should not be assigned to another. Azolla has agricultural uses as green manure, and in some contexts animal feed. Even here, claims of universal suitability would be too broad. Species, growing conditions, handling, and local practice matter. Ferns also appear in human accounts of geological resources. Ferns and fern-like plants were among the vegetation of some coal-forming wetlands, yet they shared those landscapes with giant lycophytes, horsetail relatives, seed ferns, and other plants. Coal was formed from varied ancient vegetation altered by burial, heat, and pressure. It did not arise from ferns alone. Petroleum generally has other origins, often involving aquatic microorganisms. Whether pressed into stone, repeated on cloth, held behind glass, or shaped into a spiral motif, the fern form has invited close attention. Sometimes that attention has led to study and cultivation. Sometimes it has led to excessive collecting. The history contains wonder, use, transfer, misunderstanding, and harm. A gentler form of attention begins by allowing the plant to remain where it grows. The Victorian glasshouse fades. The pressed specimens rest on their pages. Decorative patterns become shadows, then leaves. We return to the forest itself. Below the surface, a rhizome continues through dark soil. Above it, one mature frond arches over a new curled shoot. The human stories become quiet, and the older living pattern remains. Chapter 12. Resting Beneath the Fronds. Evening light settles beneath the canopy. The brightest patches have faded. Greens deepen into shadow, and the sound of rain becomes softer as it passes through the leaves above. A mature frond leans over the forest floor. Beneath it, a rhizome lies hidden among roots, soil, fungi, and stone. The individual frond will not last forever. Some fern leaves remain evergreen through the seasons. Others fade during cold or dry periods and are replaced when conditions become favorable again. The rhizome may continue for many years, producing fresh roots and a new crown of fronds. Yet even this persistence has limits. Fern lineages have endured through major geological and ecological changes. Their endurance has involved evolution, extinction, and the appearance of new species. They did not pass their deep time unchanged. Their spores can help some ferns colonize disturbed places. After the end Cretaceous extinction around 66 million years ago, fossil records in many locations show a temporary increase in fern spores. This pattern is called a fern spike. It is often understood as evidence that ferns were among the early plants to establish in disturbed landscapes. The details and strength of the pattern vary among locations, and ferns were not the only plants present. A fern spike is one record of recovery, not a sign of invulnerability. Individual species can be sensitive to change. Habitat destruction, altered forest humidity, changed fire patterns, invasive species, overcollection, and climate change can threaten fern populations. Protecting a fern may require protecting more than the visible plant. The canopy that provides shade may matter. So may the soil, the fungi around the roots, the moss where spores germinate, the stone that shelters an alpine species, and the pattern of water moving through the habitat. Conservation can be an act of attention to the whole place. Here in the woodland, that place has become familiar. There is the filtered green light, there is the cool air beside the stream, there is the rhizome beneath the leaf litter, and the young fiddlehead held in its patient curl. There are fine veins within the opened frond. Beneath the blade, brown and golden sori follow their quiet patterns. Within the sori, sporangia prepare spores. A spore enters the air and settles on damp ground. From it grows a small gametophyte, thin and easily overlooked. In a film of water, fertilization becomes possible. A new sporophyte begins, and a first tiny leaf rises beside the fading prothallus. Rain moves through all these stages. It gathers along leaflet edges, It darkens bark. It enters moss and soil. It supports roots, germination, growth, and the brief watery path between sperm and egg. Around the fern are neighbors. Trees shape the light. Fungi meet the roots. Mosses hold moisture. Insects rest beneath the pinnae. Other plants share and compete for space. Nothing here exists entirely alone, and still the forest remains quiet. The fern's complexity does not disturb its calm appearance. Knowledge simply adds depth to the green shade. A frond is a leaf, and also an arrangement of stipe, rachis, blade, pinnae, veins, and fertile structures. A fern is a visible sporophyte, and also part of a cycle that includes the hidden gametophyte. A woodland colony is a group of leaves, and also a network of rhizomes beneath the ground. An ancient lineage is not something frozen in time. It is a continuing thread, altered across generations and renewed in living forms. The rain grows lighter now. One final droplet rests at the tip of a leaflet. For a moment it remains still. Then it slips away and disappears into the soft ground below. You can rest beneath the fronds a little longer. There is no need to follow the water. No need to count the leaves or remember every name. The terms may soften and drift away. Frond, rhizome, spore, gametophyte, sporophyte, only the shelter remains. The canopy holds the wider sky at a gentle distance. Fern leaves overlap above the soil. Their shadows repeat across stone and moss. A young frond remains curled for now. It will open through growth, slowly, in its own time. The older leaves move only when the air moves. Their green divisions rise and settle together. Breathe gently beneath them. The air is cool. The ground is quiet. Rain passes softly through the canopy, leaf by leaf, until only a faint sound remains. And beneath the patient shelter of the ferns, the forest settles into stillness.